right, y'all, we've all been there. We've lost fish. Maybe we made a mistake. We're gonna talk about those mistakes here on the Googan Lab. You ever lose a fish? Like a big one, you know? Like parrot, like losing that huge fish.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Parrot, relax. Oh my god!
You're an idiot, dude.
That was a 10-pounder.
Well, sometimes it's because of foolish errors. Other times it's because, well, the fish it wasn't destiny. It wasn't meant to be caught. But there are some things that we could all do to help us get more fish in the boat. So that's what we're gonna focus on today. And you really have to keep in mind what you're throwing and the gear that you're using and know the limitations of it. So one of the big things that most people lose fish on is treble hooked baits. And it seems counterintuitive, right? Because you have so many hooks. Let's say on a crankbait like this, you have so many hooks on this, you would think that you would land them because you got more hooks going in the fish. But a lot of times what happens is you have those smaller hooks, smaller bends to them, and the fish may just slap at it. They may not get it very good. Usually immediately after you hook a fish, they start shaking their head under the water. And then when you put pressure on them, they come to the surface and they really want to jump. They're going against you. And then if they jump, they have weight on these baits that they can sling around in the air. It's different than underwater. And then the bait starts to kind of work its way out. This happens way more when the water is very warm. Their mouth tissues are looser. So these are things that you have to keep in mind. So when you're throwing a crankbait like this, it's gonna be very beneficial to have a softer action rod. You're gonna lose way less fish. You're also gonna be able to cast the bait a lot farther. What I like to do on crankbaits is I will adjust my rod, adjust my drag on my reel to where it's easy to pull out. So when I hook these fish, if they wanna make a run, they can press against the rod, so I have the rod bending, and then they can pull the drag very easily. It's a lot easier for me to tighten that back up if I feel like I need pressure. But if you hook them and then all of a sudden they have a big surge, you might lose the fish. So I always start with a loose drag. Then we have the angling aspect of it, and that's where that term comes from, is the fish is going left, you're gonna go against that fish. If the fish is going the other way, obviously you need to pull against it. But if you do it a little too much sometimes, you can rip those hooks out. And that's often where I see a lot of fish lost, is when the fish changes directions on a run, and then you're still pulling and the hook just gets the right angle where it can pop out. So especially when you're close to the boat, you feel like a fish is gonna make a big run, give it some line, loosen up that drag, don't push against them that hard. Now, if you see that the fish is hooked pretty well and you know you can sling it into the boat, then you can go ahead and put that opposite pressure on and get them close. Or maybe your buddy has a net and you net the fish. Now, when you're fishing a single hooked bait, you tend to lose a lot less fish unless you're throwing a really, really heavy weight on there. But the main thing that I like to keep in mind is when you start putting pressure on a fish and it starts coming towards the surface, you don't want to just try to jack them and ski them across the water. I've caught way more fish just taking it easy, loosening the pressure, and just keeping a steady pressure on that fish. Let it work its way down to where you have more leverage on the fish. They're not making these big surges. And then with a single hook, you can a lot of times flip a fish in the boat if it's under 5 pounds or so, and you've got the appropriate rod and line, 20-pound line or so, and you just tend to lose a lot less fish with the single hooks, Texas rig included. But just don't try to horse them into the boat. That's a lot of times where you lose that fish, especially using the heavier gear. You rip their flesh, you tear a bigger hole in their mouth, and if they move side to side or just move the wrong direction, they're gonna work that hook out of that hole. So don't try to jack them to the moon, just take it easy. Obviously, this comes with a caveat, fishing around cover. So that's when you have to make a judgment call on, I might need to put more pressure than I should on this fish to get it away from that object. And that's all part of the fun in bass fishing, is making those calculations while you're reeling in the fish. But if you see that the fish is coming out into open water, you've got it away from cover, just take it easy. So you got the fish close to the boat. It's either time to net it or land it with your hands. Here's one of the keys. Don't reel your line in too much. I like to have at least a rod's length of line out, where either my buddy that's gonna land a fish, or if I'm gonna get down and land the fish, I can stick my rod up in the air and I can grab the fish. When you have a short leader of line out to the rod tip, it is less of a rebound, less of a rubber band type experience with that line and the rod. It just makes things tighter, makes things more difficult, and it's not good for your rod either. You could also break a rod tip if the fish is really shaking hard and you don't have very much line out. So I like to have about a rod's length of line. And hopefully you get them in the boat to give them a sniff. Hopefully these tips help you land more fish. If you want to stay tuned for more, subscribe right here to the Googan Lab. We'll see you next time.